Well, when families begin to implement discipleship, what is usually the hardest part?
So the first thing I hear most parents say to me, actually there's two things and they kind of go hand in hand. The first one is, I don't know how. I don't know how to talk to my kids about Jesus. I don't really know how to do devotions. I don't know how to be like a pastor to my kids. And that's mostly because they didn't experience that. And secondly, because they've not really been equipped to do that work. The second thing I hear is, I don't have time. And that's one thing that is pretty consistent no matter who I talk to. I just don't have time to do this stuff. And so one of my goals and one of my hopes is to tell parents, first of all, you are discipling your kids. They are learning from you and watching you, even if you're not being intentional about it. So by default, you are discipling your children. And so the second thing is, if that's happening and you want to be intentional about it, let's look at your time. What are you doing? And in what you are doing, how can you invite Christ to be a part of that? How can he show up in your car rides? How can he show up in your dinner table conversations? How can Christ be a part of your everyday life?
I know we often say you make time for the things that are most important. When you talk to families and they start evaluating their time, do you ever find they really don't have time, or is it more like they don't want to make the time, or they're filling it with other things that are not essentials? How does that usually look once you start digging into that schedule?
You know, it's interesting because I would say on the surface, if you were to look at a typical family, middle-class family schedule, it is full. It is full. Most people are having two incomes or some kind of income coming into the home from both parents. Kids are involved in school and school activities, and then they do typically, if I'm talking to church families, have church activities. And so on the surface, it does look like they're very busy. What I help and I ask parents to consider doing is to take into consideration all the times that they are together and capture them. So you could waste time in front of the television, or you could use that time to help your family grow in discussions. You could waste time in the car, not talking to each other, putting in headphones and not being together. Or you can say, we're going to use this time as a family. And then really making sure that you capture the moments and use those moments rather than letting them escape your notice.
What role does the church need to play so that we can maximize our discipleship efforts?
Yeah, this is something I am hugely passionate about. So my research when I was doing my doctorate was on age segregation, so the separation of people based on their ages or stages of life. And we do that a lot in the church, and that's something that we have to recognize is going on. And there are some negative consequences to doing that sometimes. And one of those negative consequences is that youth and young people don't have that opportunity to create meaningful relationships with people who have gone ahead of them. And it's very clear in Scripture that we are called to pass our faith from one generation to another. Some of my favorite verses are about how older people in the faith mentor and disciple and just grow with someone who is younger. And so one huge thing the church can do is create spaces and opportunities for those kinds of meaningful connections to happen. And I'm of the belief that we connect so that we can build relationship, and we build relationship so we can have discipleship and mentorship. So there's a process. We have to find the spaces to connect. We have to actually help build relationships and then turn those into places where we pass on our faith. And that's where I think the church can really have a huge impact on our young people.
Well, I know that when it comes to things like discipleship and church, there's a lot of different measuring tools we use. Sometimes it's attendance, sometimes it's scripture memory, things like that.
Yeah.
Stephen Covey's famous for saying, begin with the end in mind. When it comes to discipleship, whether that's home, church, the combo of the two, what should be our ultimate goal?
Our ultimate goal is what Christ told us to do. It's the Great Commission, go and make disciples. So our ultimate goal should be creating lifelong followers of Jesus Christ. And by lifelong, we have to look at people like Peter. There was a time where Peter denied Christ. 3 times that I don't even know the man. There was a time where he wouldn't talk or even share his faith with Gentiles because he didn't think they could be a part of it. Being a lifelong disciple means that we are growing and changing. We are going through really hard places and really great places, and we're sharing that in a community. We are there for one another. So our goal shouldn't be that we can mark things off on a sheet and say, we've done these things, like a checklist. It should be, how can I help you follow Jesus? That's what a disciple is, a follower of Jesus. And we can disciple one another. I could disciple you right now just by saying, David, follow Jesus. He loves you. He has a plan for your life. As long as we are pointing to Christ, that should be our ultimate goal.